You're listening to the Fierce Fatty Podcast, episode 172, The Science of Protecting Ourselves from Anti-Fat Bias. Let's do it!
Perfect.
Hello and welcome, my little fierce fatty and fat allies. Fierce fatties. My little fierce fatties. Should it be juicy, big fierce fatties? How you doing? How's life? What's going on? What's the crack, as we'd say in Ireland? Crack is Gaelic for a lot of things. It's Gaelic for what's the news? What's the gossip? How are you? Is it good? Was it good? Did you have a good crack? They are a good crack. Spelled C-R-A-I-C. I forget sometimes when I'm talking to people who don't know what that means. Like, what's a crack? I'm like, no, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. But anyway, there you go. You know what I mean when I say that. So today I want to talk about a paper that came out and was covered by Regan Chastain and a few other things around what the science shows about how we can survive a fat-hating world and not become dead. And the harms of anti-fatness, weight stigma. I don't really like using weight stigma as much because, the phrase weight stigma, because what I found is that there'll be a way that thin people will make it about them and they'll say weight stigma, oh, I was skinny shamed. And it's like, that's not what weight stigma is about. It's about fat folks. So, but a lot of this research is talking about WS, weight stigma. So, so I'll just use weight stigma. But my preference is not to say weight stigma, although there's nothing wrong with it. But I mean, sometimes when people hear it or read it, they think it means all types of weight stigma, like for all body sizes, but it's meant to be for fat folks. So Regan has got a Substack. Substack is kind of like a Patreon or a Medium, or, it's like you can read some of her posts for free, a lot of them actually for free. And then there's other ones, which is like ask me anything type of thing. If you're not subscribed already, it's like $20 for a year. I mean, it's cheap. And Regan is amazing. I talk about Regan on the show like all the time. I'm like such a fan person. It's creepy. I'm just a giant creep. I guess Regan and I are colleagues, I guess. To be in the same realm of Regan just seems funny to me because, she's been doing it a lot longer than me, but, we've collaborated on things in the past and we've chatted and emailed. So I'm claiming that title of colleague. So I'm going to have the links for everything on the show notes. Again, just a reminder, if you've not heard about it, there is a transcript for every single show on the show notes. Go on the website, which is fiercefatty.com/podcast, or for this episode is fiercefatty.com/172. There'll be a button there saying transcript, and you can go to the transcript, and you can also click another button that will take you so that you can listen and watch the transcript at the same time and read the words go by one, and it highlights the words, and I think that's cool too. So if that's something that is useful for you, that's there for every single episode that we've ever done. So let's start in by looking at the study that Regan is talking about in her post. Her post said, study looks at ways to protect ourselves from weight stigma. So I'm just going to go straight to the study and pull out a paragraph here of the harms of weight stigma. So weight stigma is a form of social stigma that primarily targets higher weight individuals in virtually every domain of daily living, and it is becoming the norm worldwide. And so then they talk about what's in the paper, continuing. A critical take-home message from this review in the paper is that the multiple injurious effects of weight stigma on body image and beyond are incontrovertible. Let me read that again. Multiple injurious effects of weight stigma on body image and beyond are incontrovertible. There's no doubt that anti-fat bias hurts us physically and mentally. Continuing, but very little has been done to address it. In our final note, we recognise the need for body image and eating disorder scholars and practitioners to become part of the solution to ending weight bias in our communities and for our clients. Just perfect timing. I watched a training by Mikey and Monica Kriete called Anti-fatness and Public Health for New England Public Health Training Center. Really fucking good. It's on Mikey's Patreon. Link will be in the bio, and it's a free watch if you want to watch it. So good. Salivating watching it. And they describe, there's a slide which is understanding anti-fatness through the social ecological model. So I don't know if you remember, but on the show and on my Instagram, I've described the levels of anti-fat bias: individual, interpersonal, institutional, intrapersonal. And they have done something a little different, is they've broken it down into micro, meso, and macro. So micro being the individual, meso being the interpersonal, and macro being the institutional. So on the micro individual area on the slide, and this is, you can go and check out Mikey's Patreon for this. It talks about anti-fatness, okay, and the effects. Okay, so we've got internalized fat phobia, distorted relationships with food and body. Example: dissatisfaction, shame, disordered eating. Medical and complex trauma. So the complex trauma they're talking about there is the trauma of going to healthcare professionals again and again and again and again and continually getting those traumas. And they might not be, big traumas, or they could be big traumas. And they're happening again and again and again. High allostatic load, dysregulated metabolism, discontinuity of care, weight cycling, which is yo-yo dieting, and mortality. I miss one here, and it's mental health sequelae. Example: depression, anxiety. Sequelae means a condition which is a consequence of a previous disease or injury. So the final one there was mortality. And so I just want to give you a quote from a study that looks at, looks at this: weight discrimination and risk of mortality, from Psychological Science. And quote, this is the beginning of the study. Discrimination based on weight is a stressful social experience linked to declines in physical and mental health. We examined whether this harmful association extends to risk of mortality. Participants in the health and retirement study, so there was participants in this study called Health and Retirement. There was 13,692 of them. And the Midlife in United States study, MIDAS for short, and there was 5,079 people in that. So we have 13, 5, 18, 6, something, 18,600 roughly people, reported on perceived discriminatory experiences and attributed those experiences to a number of personal characteristics, including weight. So we have 18,000 people, and they say, hey, I experienced something discriminatory based on this personal characteristic. weight discrimination was associated with an increase in mortality risk of nearly 60% in both the groups of participants. This increased risk was not accounted for by common physical and psychological risk factors. So the risk was not accounted for by common physical and psychological risk factors. The association between mortality and weight discrimination was generally stronger than that between mortality and other attributions for discrimination. So the risk of mortality is stronger with weight discrimination than it is for other attributions for discrimination. So say if someone was like, oh, you're old and I hate old people, or they say you're fat and I hate fat people, the association between mortality was higher with the weight discrimination. In addition to its association with poor health outcomes, weight discrimination may shorten life expectancy. Okay, so weight bias, weight stigma, anti-fatness is deadly, right? It's deadly. And so it's no good. So let's go back to the original study. And I didn't even tell you the name of it. The original study that we're looking at is called Challenging Oppression, a social identity model of stigma resistance in higher weight individuals. Angela Meadows and Suzanne Higgs. And it's open access, by the way, so you can go and read it if you would like to. So how did they go about this, measuring weight stigma and what to do about it? Actually, scrap that. We're going to go to another study from Angela Meadows and Rachel Calagero. And this is studies on weight stigma and body image in higher weight individuals. So studies on weight stigma and body image in higher weight individuals. Okay, so what they're looking at is, in this study, is like how weight stigma affects body image. Okay, so looking at how they collected this information. If you ask someone, hey, have you experienced anti-fatness in your life? Most people will who are not in fat liberation will recall, a few significant things throughout their life. A lot of times people don't realize something is stigma because they feel like they deserve it. And so they're like, well, I deserve that bad treatment because I'm fat. So is it stigma or is it just me getting my just desserts? Also, people fail to remember or struggle to remember. If I said, even if you were aware of anti-fatness, can you remember every single thing that happened or discriminatory experience? Again, it would probably be the big ones and not the everyday things. So, quote, Myers and Rosen developed one of the first complex measures of experienced weight stigma, the Stigmatizing Situations Inventory. The SSI prompts respondents using a list of 50 specific situations across 11 different domains: family, strangers, employment, doctors, etc. And participants indicate how often they have ever experienced each type of stigma. A US study in which 50 higher weight women completed a daily diary for each day for 7 days indicated whether any of the 50 items of the SSI had occurred to them that day, resulted in over 1,000 incidents being recorded, or approximately 3 incidences per person over the 7 days. Additionally, none of the currently used measures of experienced weight stigma include the media as a possible source of stigma. So that's an issue with that, of collecting people's experiences. So with that method, the SSI method, Stigmatizing Situations Inventory, they've not including media, which, as we know, is huge. So continuing, representations of higher weight bodies in both news and entertainment media are most often stigmatizing in nature, and the media is frequently mentioned as a source of weight stigma in qualitative studies and studies that capture stigma experiences in real time. Thus, in addition to issues with the reliability of recall, it is likely that existing quantitative studies of experienced weight stigma may further underestimate the extent of exposure to such negative measures. an Australian study of 46 higher weight Australian adults, in which the media was included as a potential source of stigma in the instructions to participants. Participants completed the SSI at the start of the study and reported on average having 5 experienced weight stigma several times in their life. By comparison, using a personal digital assistant to recording stigmatizing events as they occurred, these same participants recorded on average 11.1 episodes of weight stigma over the subsequent 2-week period, or approximately 0.8 episodes per day. So that's interesting, right? If we're thinking about media, it goes from 3 incidences over 7 days to 0.8 per day. So 11.1 over 2 weeks. So let's say that's 5.5 over 1 week. The other one was 3 over 1 week. And previous to the study, 5 said that they experienced weight stigma several times in their life. And then after 2 weeks, that several has been identified to be a very low guesstimate, because they're experiencing 11 in 2 weeks. So that's interesting. So all that to tell you that even if you don't, you're soaking this shit up in the environment, right? If you live in a bigger body, the rate of weight stigma that you're experiencing is probably higher than what you presume it to be. And that's like, when I reflect on my own experiences, I'm like, oh man, I've got no weight stigma in my life. I've got no anti-fatness, right? Because this is my job. Fat activist. I don't stand for that shit. But if we think about it, like, how many times has my doctor said to me, oh, you have this condition, lose weight? Many times. How many times have I seen shows that make fun of fat people, or show that thinness is the ideal, or come across a Tinder profile that says only healthy people, etc., right? And if we think about it like that, the ways are numerous. And even though there might not be these big things, like we will remember like core memories of our mum saying XYZ when we were young, the weight of all of those together might be just as powerful as, this incident or that incident, and that's just over a week or 2 weeks or a month or whatever. Okay, so let's talk about internalized anti-fatness. When higher weight individuals, this is a quote from the same paper that we're reading, when higher weight individuals endorse negative stereotypes and ascribe those negative attributes to themselves, they are said to express internalized weight stigma or weight-related self-stigma. Internalized weight stigma is most commonly defined as not just awareness or even endorsement of negative stereotypes, but is also as applying those negative attributes to yourself and subsequently devaluing yourself because of it. So internalized anti-fatness is, so I know that they say that fat people are about to spontaneously combust because they're so unhealthy, and I think that's true, so that would be internalized anti-fatness or internalized weight stigma. It not being internalized, and I'm a bad person because of it, and not internalizing weight stigma, which is where we're trying to get in this work, is saying, they say that fat people are lazy and greedy and horrible, but I don't agree with them, and I think that I'm an okay person, right? So that you wouldn't be internalizing weight stigma. Now, is it as black and white as that? Fuck no. Are people going to be like, yeah, I know that, that is bullshit, and then also have thoughts of, but I'm a piece of shit? Very often. So when I'm doing coaching with people, almost exclusively, they will say, I think that fat people can be beautiful and healthy and deserve care, and all of the things that we've been taught are bullshit. But when it comes to me, this is the thing. when it comes to them, all of that goes out the window. No. Can I be beautiful and fat? No. Am I going to be greedy and lazy if I have a big body or a bigger body? Yes. Am I desirable? No. Like, it's so clear cut. And so that's, someone who's still struggling with anti-fat bias. And it's a process. And so that's what we want to do, is get away from that internalization, which is hard work. Something that I do, which might be helpful, a little exercise for you, is when I talk to coaching clients, is I ask them a question. If I had a crystal ball, I don't have a crystal ball, and I can see into the future. I cannot see into the future. And I saw you and I said, hey, by the way, in the future, you have a bigger body. What comes up for you? And it's really illuminating, because certain things will come up, and not everyone's are the same. So if we're looking at things like desirability, health, worthiness, whether someone is a productive member of society, whether they are morally good or bad. And so asking yourself, like, if I had a bigger body, would I be attractive? Would that, if I'm not attractive, would that define my worth as a human in my eyes? Not in society's eyes. Would I be happy? Why not? And, some people will say, well, because I'll be isolated, I'll be lonely, I won't have anyone to love me. Okay, so that tells me that there's, you've been taught some things about fat people, that we're all lonely and sad and can't find someone to love us. And so go on and asking yourself those questions of, and then like a question of, well, how might you have come about having a bigger body? And, the answer is, what we're looking for is, it's just, who knows? It's just the way it is. Nothing like I'm a lazy, greedy person. A lot of people will say, oh, because I'm lazy, because I'm greedy, then I'm out of control. And I'm like, oh, this is good stuff. This is good stuff. Because when we recognize these things, we can see where we've got that sticky, yucky anti-fatness just clinging around. And so we can think about other people. Oh, yeah, no, I think fat people are amazing. But when we make it about ourselves, that's when that anti-fatness really comes out. But the stage before that is, you think all fat people are horrible and disgusting. So if you're past that stage, then that's great, right? Because then you can work on that really like deep stuff, because you've learned that you've overcome that kind of like, all fat people are gross. Never mind me, I'm gross. Even blah blah blah. Okay, so correlates of experienced and internalized weight stigma. So, quote, both experienced, so people experiencing weight stigma from other people or other sources, and internalized, both experienced, when experienced is having that experience of someone or something happening which is stigmatizing, and internalized, so that's you thinking that fatness is bad and you're bad because you're fat. So both experienced and internalized weight stigma have been linked with a range of physical and psychological and behavioral outcomes, even after controlling for BMI. And other potential confounding factors included disordered eating patterns, reduced motivation to exercise, avoidant coping strategies, substance dependence, and social and behavioral problems in adolescence, including substance use, self-harm, and suicidality. Okay, so that's what they controlled for. So just to kind of that sentence again, weight stigma has been linked with a range of physical, psychological, and behavioral outcomes, even after controlling for different things. Weight stigma is also strongly associated with healthcare avoidance among higher weight individuals, including reduced engagement with preventative screening programs. Perceived weight discrimination is associated with higher risk of chronic morbidity and mortality. So just a reminder of morbidity, mortality. The term morbidity refers to illness or disease. Mortality refers to death. So where were we? Perceived weight discrimination is associated with higher risk of chronic morbidity and mortality, so getting sick and dying, and with poorer self-reported physical and psychological health and health-related quality of life. Indeed, both actual experience of stigma and simply fear of being stigmatized by others appears to mediate the relationship between higher BMI and poorer self-reported health. Let me say that again. Both actual experience of stigma and simply fear of being stigmatized by others. So that could be that fear of, I don't want to get bigger because if I do, I'm going to experience worse things, which could be true because society is fat phobic as fuck, right? But to what extent? And is that stigmatizing from you? And so how much is it going to come to reality? But even just that fear, if the fear of being stigmatized by others appears to mediate the relationship between higher BMI and poorer self-reported health. So they link to a study there. The study says, quote, weight stigma is pervasive in the United States. We tested the hypothesis that stigma may be a mechanism through which fatness negatively affects self-reported health. So, does anti-fatness harm our health? And then the report was yes. And is that the mechanism, the thing that causes that negative self-reporting of health? Basically, yes, it does. Continuing, in another study, the association between higher BMI and poorer health-related quality of life was only observed in those individuals who also had high levels of internalized weight stigma. So let me say that again. In another study, the association between higher BMI and poorer physical health-related quality of life was only observed in those individuals who also had high levels of internalized weight stigma. I think that's really important because what this is saying is that we can live in a fat-phobic world and we can protect ourselves by not allowing those messages into our being, by not agreeing with the oppressors. And then we are able to mitigate the harms of anti-fatness. So the people who are the highest risk of harm from anti-fatness are those who had high levels of internalized weight stigma. And the thing is, what are we doing to fat people? We are making them stigmatized. We are telling fat people you're horrible and disgusting and you should, and it's that self-fulfilling prophecy. A fat person is sick and they're told that they need to lose weight. The act of trying to lose weight causes harm. The act of telling someone to lose weight causes them to experience stigma. The fact that they fail at losing weight increases stigma, and it means that even if they've never attempted weight loss, it means that there's avoidance of going to healthcare professionals, delayed diagnosis, and then the fat person gets sick, dies, and then it's like, we told you fat people are sick, are dying because they are fat and lazy and horrible and blah, blah, blah. So you better go on a diet and not become fat. And then the circle continues and continues and continues. So, it's just like a self-fulfilling prophecy. But then if we take a cog out of that wheel and say, okay, hey, you're fat, you should go and lose weight. And then you say, fuck that. I don't think so. We're removing ourselves from that process, right? And doing better for our physical and mental health because of that. Okay, so next, experience, weight stigma, and body image. So studies have found that frequency of stigmatizing experiences is strongly correlated with body image distress in weight loss treatment seeking populations. Okay, so people who are looking to lose weight have more frequency of stigmatizing experience, and that is strongly correlated with body image distress. And the effect is exacerbated when the targets also hold stronger anti-fat attitudes themselves. So if you're anti-fat, then you probably have bad body image. In a community sample of higher weight individuals, 97% of the 111 participants reported having ever experienced weight stigma, with half having such experiences at least once per week. Scores were strongly correlated with body dissatisfaction. An adapted version of the SSI, remember the SSI was like saying, how many times have you experienced stigma? An adapted version of the SSI that examined experienced weight stigma at different life points found formative experiences of weight stigma during childhood, in particular, have lingering effects on adult body image problems. So that's that, why fucking up kids is so harmful. It's having a huge impact. And I tell you, the amount of times I talk to someone who is struggling with body image and they mention a parent or guardian saying or doing something fucked up, like 90+%. Really, I really feel like if parents or guardians or adults in children's lives understood about anti-fatness and did stuff about it, they're really setting up their kid for success in regards to body image stuff, of not having issues with body image. Okay, so internalized weight stigma and body image. The relationship between both self-reported and objectively measured BMI tends to only weakly correlate with measures of body image. That is, poor body image is less related to actual body weight and shape, but is rather dependent upon negative self-evaluation due to weight. So what that means is, it doesn't matter what your body size is, you can have a smaller body and also perceive that to be so egregious that it's going to have a more negative effect, versus someone who has a bigger body and is just like, my body's fine. So it's not that the bigger the body equals worse body image issues. It's how you perceive your body. In fact, two separate studies conducted in higher weight community samples, BMI and a general dislike of fat individuals accounted for only a small amount of the variance in body image concerns, whereas internalized weight stigma explained between a third and a half of the variation in scores. And so these are people who are not liking themselves due to weight stigma and anti-fatness. And so no matter your size, if you are agreeing with anti-fatness, then that is going to affect your body image. Next, being stigmatized by others because of one's weight is associated with higher levels of internalized weight bias, which in turn is linked with poorer body image. Yeah. So again, people in your life, doctors, etc. If you've been stigmatized, it's linked with poorer body image. Then finally, they have a thing about ethnic and cultural differences, and basically they're saying that, quote here, although early cross-cultural studies suggested differences in anti-fat attitudes between countries, negative attitudes towards higher weight bodies are becoming the norm. So finally, looking at ethnic and cultural differences, although early cross-cultural studies suggested differences in anti-fat attitudes between countries, negative attitudes towards higher weight bodies are becoming the norm worldwide, even in countries where fat was previously admired and experienced. Weight stigma is now prevalent in both developed and developing countries. So basically they're saying that ethnic and cultural differences, the differences are not as apparent as they used to be, because anti-fatness is spreading around the world. So thanks, white supremacy, for that. Great contribution to the world. Okay, so basically all that to say that is anti-fatness is bad, right? Anti-fatness is bad for us. So the answer to today's topic question, the science of protecting ourselves from anti-fatness. So how do we protect ourselves? And I think we've got an idea already from looking at that other study. So let's look at the study, the original study that I was talking about, again by Angela Meadows. Links are going to be in the show notes. And so basically, number one to overcoming this stuff is deciding whether you belong to the group that is called fat or not. And we're just using the word fat as like the group fat. There's no group where we all band together where we say, hey, this is group fat. It's just a concept of fat community. Okay. So this is a quote from Reagan. In order to identify predictors of weight stigma resistance, they examined factors including the alignment with the group fat. They start from social identity theory, which is, as Meadow explains, quote, a theory of intergroup behavior that was developed in the 60s and 70s. Evidence from many types of marginalized groups suggests that where people can leave a devalued group, that is usually the strategy they pursue. This is what we know from experience, but it hadn't previously been applied to the idea that weight controllability beliefs constitute that permeable/impermeable group boundary, so should predict activism or alternative behaviors. So Reagan says, in the context of that framework, the assumption was that those who think weight is changeable are likely to be working to leave the fat group or enter the not fat group, whereas those who have come to the conclusion that long-term significant weight loss is improbable, including through their own experience of weight cycling, may come to view themselves as permanent members of the fat group. For those members of the fat group, the next determinant of stigma resistance becomes if they believe they deserve lower status, or if they think that lower status is being unfairly foisted on them. The study authors create an online survey to measure perceived stigma level of identification as O-word/fat person, because, not every fat person would identify as fat, right? Perceived legitimacy of anti-fat discrimination, group permeability, so can I get out of the fat group, stigma resistance, internalized weight stigma, and global self-esteem. Based on their answers, subjects were sorted into three groups. About a third were internalizers, who tended to agree with statements relating to internalized weight stigma beliefs. About 17% of the subjects were classified as indifferent. They tended to disagree or had no strong opinion about statements relating to either weight stigma internalization or weight stigma resistance. Finally, 50% were resistors. 50% were resistors! Oh my God, I love this. Those who, quote, tended to disagree with or have no strong opinions about internalization statements and tended to agree with statements about weight stigma resistance. Yeah, go 50%. In the subsequent analysis, perceived legitimacy of weight stigma was the most important predictor of internalized stigma, Meadows explains. Let me read that again. In the subsequent analysis, perceived legitimacy of weight stigma was the most important predictor of internalized stigma. If you're agreeing with people, you're going to have that internalized stigma. As we know, that internalized stigma is harmful AF. Quote, I think it's easy to understand conceptually, this is from Angela, if you think of it as a kind of continuum, even though it's not fully linear with internalizers at one end and resistors at the other. The point here is that legitimacy beliefs were the best predictor of whether people tended to be internalizers or resistors. Internalizers had higher perceived legitimacy beliefs, although still not high, whereas resistors were way down at the bottom of the measurement scale. Investment in the fat group also predicted resistance, but people were able to reach resistor status even if they didn't invest in the fat group. Meadow says, to me, this is the most exciting and important piece. Group identity is usually considered the major determinant of activism/resistance. That resistors existed who weren't identified within the group was super interesting. You could use an allyship angle. Everyone needs to fight stigma, whatever their own body looks like or their relationship with it. It's a place we can start even if we haven't quite got a full acceptance yet. Yes, as is the case with many of us who have discovered fat acceptance/liberation movements. We get it in principle, but it's hard to overcome all that brainwashing. But we can still fight stigma because stigma is bad. Group investment brings benefits on its own. In-group identity is associated with improved well-being across marginalized groups. So that's really cool. So, like we were saying, like there's a scale. There was like a scale, like a continuum of the resistors and the internalizers. And to be a resistor, to get those benefits of not internalizing anti-fatness, you didn't necessarily have to be, like a fat activist or have a load of fat friends or, be in Facebook groups with fat people. You could just be like, I think that stuff is bullshit and I don't believe it, which is really, really exciting and encouraging because if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably there, or close to being there, or have been there and past there for a long time, which can help us breathe a sigh of relief that we are doing such incredible work to resist anti-fatness. How cool is that? How cool is that? And it's interesting, right? Like, I see this of, the people who are really struggling is like, they don't want to identify as fat. Because what they're identifying as in their mind is, ugly and lazy and unhealthy and horrible and all those negative things, right? And so that group permeability, that like Angela Meadows was saying, that people traditionally want to get out of the group, the stigmatized group, if they can. And it's been seen that fatness is a stigmatized group that you can get out of. And so if you have that belief, and you're trying to get out of that belief, out of that group, the fat group, then that's not helpful. That's not helpful in regards to seeing the negative effects of weight stigma. And so the first step being, okay, I've realized that I can't get out of the group. And so it's kind of like acceptance. And then the next step being, these are my people. This is who I am, and it's fine. And maybe the next step is, kind of like it here. Fat people rock. If you want help to get with, why would you like it here type of thing, I have an Instagram post that came out this week, 28 benefits of being fat. It was also a podcast episode, maybe 50 episodes ago. My goodness. Let's see how long ago it was. Episode 128. What are we on? 70 something. Yeah. So, not a bad guess. Yeah. So 28 benefits of being fat, right? Like, so things like, better cancer survivor rates, reduced mortality. So, fat people tend to live longer than straight-sized people. Buoyancy, being able to recover quicker from COVID, visually interesting, bigot filter, etc. And also, you know what? I think, the acceptance of the group fat is not saying it's not hard to be in this group sometimes. A lot of the times. Daily, maybe. But it's not the group's... the fact that the group exists, that's the problem. It's what's happening around us to tell us that this group is bad. I think that's a big difference. Okay, so if you're struggling with this, ask yourself, what beliefs do you have about fatness with you? So those things to think about is, if I had a crystal ball in the future, I could see that you have a bigger body than you have now. Or maybe even if that's too much, that your current body, if you desire to be smaller. And then ask yourself, how desirable would I be? Ask yourself, what is my health status? It's interesting because, some people will be like, my health would be fine. My health would be the same it is now. Some people would be like, I have type 2 diabetes. And I'm like, oh, juicy. Okay, so it tells me that you need to unlearn the bullshit you've learned about type 2 diabetes. You need to learn that it's a genetic condition, that you can't eat your way to it, A lot of times it's conditions that run in the family. Yes, a desirability. Some people are like, I actually have a really cool husband, or I know my husband wouldn't like it. Dump him. Or, I just know I would be unattractive. And it's like, who says so? Do you need to be attractive? Eating, like, what would your eating look like? Sometimes people are like, oh, I'd have an eating disorder if I had a bigger body. It's because I have an eating disorder. Okay, so we need to unlearn stuff about that. People would say I'd be lazy, I would never work out. Okay, so we need to learn about how fat people can choose to work out if they want to. Learn about mobility and ableism and healthism and that type of stuff. Not mobility. Mobility is the next point. It was just in my brain. So when you're thinking about laziness, also colonization, white supremacy, because laziness is attached to that. I mean, health and desirability and all of that is it's all attached to white supremacy, right? But laziness, particularly, I think about colonization and white supremacy with that. Mobility. So will you say, I'll become disabled? Okay. So again, we need to look at ableism, and we'll have to look at, what is the reality of living in a bigger body? Happiness. Would you be happy? Would you be sad? Would you be isolated? Would you have family? Would you not have family? Like your choice. Like, would you be able to achieve the goals that you want in life? So asking those questions is going to be helpful in helping you, guide you to where you need to go next, and get curious, because sometimes it's hard to know, I don't quite feel there, but I don't know why I can't just shake the idea that I am unattractive because I'm fat, or I'm... Also, what or who do you have in your life that supports anti-fatness and supports fat joy? Okay. Because that's the, people having these stigmatizing experiences. Often I talk to people and I ask them this question. Oh, my mum, so often, it's so often people say, my mum, she makes comments. She doesn't say them about me. She says them about herself. She says that she's lost weight, or she says she needs to go on a diet, or she says she's too fat. And, it's only a little comment, so I don't say anything. And I think, how many thousands of only little comments have you heard during your life? Is that supporting you in your difficult journey? This is difficult. This is a difficult journey because we are surrounded by anti-fatness. Is that supporting you? And they'll say, my mum will never change. We need to give our loved ones the opportunities to be close to us if we think that it's appropriate. If you want to be close to them, right? Because I feel like we put up a barrier when we say, they will never change. If they heard us say that, they might say, give me a chance. I might surprise you. maybe they'll say, you're right, I'll never change. But I mean, if we can, if it feels good and right, giving people the chance to say, hey, I'm doing this thing. I'd love your help. Can you not talk about diets or whatever? And with a big asterisk of, having levels of privilege to be able to do that, and how it's difficult. But also on the flip side of that, how much fat joy do you have in your life? How many wonderful stories about fat people having great lives do you see? Can you think of like a handful? How many stories of thin people having a good life have you seen? I mean, your fingers, you'd have to have like 100,000 fingers to count up, because it's innumerable. Because that's the way fatness is presented. It's like, sad sack. Fatness is presented as the film The Whale. If you've not listened to that podcast episode, it's just like fucking depressed, and the kid hates them and their life is so sad, versus fat people being complex humans just like thin people. It's weird. It's so strange. And, of course, there are fat people who are depressed, and fat people who are isolated, and fat people who have certain issues. And guess what? There are also fat people who are happy, who have wonderful families, who have great relationships, who are worshipped and adored by their partners, who have great jobs, who are successful, who fall asleep at night and have a smile on their face. And there are many fat people who are on different levels of that spectrum, right? But we're seeing just that one side of the story. Of like, what do we know about fat people? Especially fat people with more marginalizations, especially fat people who are disabled. Oh, their life is absolutely shit, which is so offensive to the people who are living those lives. And some people will say, yeah, my life is shit, but some people will say, I'm just getting on with life, I'm just here with my cat and I'm happy. Like, what? Go away. And finally, how can you identify and connect with the fat community? And this is not, you don't have to, but I think it's really helpful. Being in that fat group, you're in the fat group, okay? We've decided we're in the fat group. We can't get out of the fat group, which in my idea, my brain is like, I don't care. I'm happy to be here. This is a great little party island, fat party island. Oh, we'd make a little like kind of, what would the fat in-group be? Would it be, there would be a pool, there would be floaties, but we wouldn't need them because the fat people would float. There would be wonderful activities, and there'd be no food shaming, and there'd be no body shaming, and people would be able to wear what they want. And what a wonderful place it would be. There'd be joy and laughing and softness and just giggles, and what a great place Fat Island would be. So yeah, go and find that fat community if you can. And again, it doesn't have to be in person. We don't want to devalue virtual spaces. Some people cannot access in-person spaces, and then sometimes virtual spaces are better, right? You can connect with people all across the world. So that is our podcast today. I feel excited, right? I hope you feel a bit hopeful, because we hear all these like, wow, fat people are about to die, la la la, fatness is so bad for you, weight stigma is bad, and we are doing the things to protect ourselves from weight stigma, aren't we? We are. We're not engaging in dieting. We're not agreeing with the oppressors. Now, the final thing, which is really tricky, is engaging with healthcare professionals and getting care. And that's a lot of times out of our control, right? So if we can be really fucking stubborn about getting healthcare, then that would be amazing. Actually, it makes me think about Fat Trans Person Makes History, SJ. Let me find SJ's post. SJ Thompson Belmonte. Their Instagram handle is callmesj.theletters. Fat Trans History was made last month. So Body Honor Nutrition made this post about SJ. So basically, did you know, this is a post, did you know on May 24th, 2023, S.J. Thompson Belmonte made fat trans history by winning a 3-year-long battle with the state of Oregon after being denied coverage for top surgery because they are fat. If S.J. were thin, it would have taken only a matter of months to have surgery. Instead, it took them 3 years. They contacted several advocacy organizations and were mostly dismissed and ignored. S.J. started this fight back in the dark, not knowing if there would be light at the end of the tunnel. There wasn't a single legal precedent in the entire state of Oregon and likely most of the nation. Both S.J. and their lawyer did not know what to expect. Now their story and case can offer hope and guidance for other fat trans people facing medical discrimination. For those of you who don't know S.J., they are a special part of the fat eating disorder community. They have given us so much and now they need our help. They will finally have surgery this summer and will take 3 to 4 weeks off to recover. Let's support S.J. by raising money to help cover their bills and recovery needs. And there's links to donate to S.J. S.J. is multiply marginalized and is low income and is studying. I don't know how the fuck they did that. The tenacity to... Can you imagine? To do that for 3 years. Wow. So anyway, and I'm not saying everyone has to do that. Everyone has a capacity. And I'm not saying, take on the legal system. And I mean, shit, you're like, I just want to, I've just got a stubbed toe. Like, shit, calm down. But, you deserve healthcare. What I'm trying to say is you deserve healthcare. And if you're not getting it, reach out for support from fat advocacy groups and know that what you're experiencing is not okay, right? You can say, depending on your situation, you can say, I don't want to be weighed, or my weight is not up for discussion today, or I have someone come in and into the office with you and help act as your advocate and I just hope fat people are given healthcare. Fucking pieces of shit. I swear. But you know what? Like I mentioned, I was on this training for the New England Public Healthcare Training, so it was healthcare providers. The comments, apart from one idiot called Catherine, who was like, I'm going to play devil's advocate. Literally, Catherine was saying, I'm going to play devil's advocate twice. Catherine said that. And I was like, fuck off. I was watching the recording of it, and so I wasn't there to be like, Catherine, shut your fucking mouth. But guess what? Lots of people said, Catherine, shut your fucking mouth. And lots of people on the call in the comments were saying yes, and they were agreeing, and they were saying really awesome things in response. Like they know what they were talking about in regards to anti-fatness. Oh, it was amazing. It was amazing. So that gave me hope. Anyway, I just put that link for SJ in for the show notes. So if you'd like to donate to SJ, I think last time I checked, they were kind of like maybe halfway onto their goal. Where did your link go? SJ, why did you move that link? Maybe they got that. Maybe they reached their goal. No, they didn't reach their goal. Maybe they just felt a bit. It probably feels fucking shit to ask for money, right? I'm gonna link to directly to their GoFundMe. They're at $4,486 of their $6,000 goal. They're gonna get surgery on July 6th. Imagine having to live not getting surgery in a body that doesn't feel like you, when your thin counterpart could get that surgery in 3 months, theoretically. How unjust is that? All right, so I'm going to leave it here. If you enjoyed the show, you want to support me, go to Ko-fi, link in the show notes. Direct link for the show notes, facefatty.com/172 for all the links to everything. I'm going to make this into a Instagram post, so if you want a reminder of the shit that I said, of these great studies and papers and la 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 lip lip, and my kind of what beliefs do you have about anti-fatness question and the categories, all of that, I'm going to put in an Instagram post. My Instagram is great. If you're not on Instagram, you should get on Instagram just to follow me. If you are on Instagram and you're not following me, what are you doing with your life? Come on now. I'm great on Instagram to follow because I also share fucking funny memes. It's one of my favourite parts about Instagram. I've got pins and needles in my arms. My desk is too high, and so when I'm typing, I get pins and needles in my arms. But I only sit at my desk when I do my podcast, so it's not a big deal, so whatever. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking. Okay, bye. God. All right, I'll see you in a while. Alligator stay fierce fatty. Goodbye. Goodbye.